My name is Miranda, 34, and I stood outside the medical school auditorium clutching an invitation I'd received 3 months ago. I'm sorry, but Elise said you're not on the list, the event coordinator explained, avoiding eye contact. $9,000. 4 years of sacrifices. Countless nights helping her study. And now, on her graduation day, my sister had erased me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Where are you? Elise is about to walk. That's when I saw her. Perfect Elise in her cap and gown, arm in arm with her new family. If you've ever felt the sting of family betrayal like I did that day, you're not alone. I still remember the weight of that graduation gift in my hands as I stood there, locked out of one of the most important days I'd sacrificed everything for. Before I tell you how this family nightmare unfolded and the unbelievable truth I discovered later, let me know where you're watching from the comments. Has someone in your family ever taken your support for granted? This story might hit close to home for many of you. If you want to see more true family drama stories like mine, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my sister, my mother, and the family I thought I was protecting. Elise came into this world when I was 7 years old. I still remember the day my parents brought her home, this tiny bundle with bright blue eyes and a tuft of blonde hair. Miranda, meet your baby sister, my mother had said, her voice filled with a reverence I rarely heard directed at me. You're going to be the best big sister. And I tried to be, I really did. Growing up, the differences in how our parents treated us became more apparent with each passing year. Elise was the gifted child, the one whose finger paintings were framed and hung in the living room, whose report cards were celebrated with special dinners, whose dreams were nurtured with expensive classes and enrichment programs. I was the responsible one, reliable, level-headed Miranda who would surely find her way without much fuss or attention. When I expressed interest in business during high school, my parents nodded with mild approval. When Elise declared at 12 that she wanted to be a doctor, my father's eyes lit up with a pride I'd never seen before. A doctor in the family, he'd say, beaming at her. That's something special. I didn't resent her for it, not really. Elise was bright, charming, and determined. She had a way of making everyone around her feel special, even me. We had our sisterly moments, late-night talks, shopping trips, inside jokes that made our mother roll her eyes. But there was always an invisible line between us, drawn by our parents' expectations and priorities. After high school, I enrolled in a business program at the state university, paying my way with a combination of scholarships, part-time work, and student loans. Meanwhile, Elise was being groomed for the pre-med track at more prestigious institutions. My parents started a special savings account for her education that they never mentioned creating for me. I was halfway through my MBA program when our father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim from the start, and our family was devastated. At 23, I made the decision that would alter the course of my life. I dropped out of my program to help care for him and support the family. You can always go back later, my mother assured me, though her attention was already shifting back to how this would affect Elise's education. Elise needs to stay focused on her studies. This is such a critical time for her future. So I moved back home while Elise remained at college. I took over managing my father's medications, driving him to appointments, and eventually administering his hospice care. I fielded calls from insurance companies, organized his paperwork, and took on the household responsibilities my mother couldn't handle in her grief. All the while, Elise visited on occasional weekends, crying over our father's deteriorating condition before retreating back to the safety of her campus life. No one suggested she take a semester off or reduce her course load. Her education remained sacrosanct. When our father passed away after 8 months of illness, I was holding his hand. Elise was taking a final exam, having decided, with our mother's blessing, that Dad would want her to finish the semester strong. After the funeral, I became the financial backbone of what remained of our family. My mother, never having managed the household finances, floundered in widowhood. I took on the task of sorting through my father's affairs, discovering that his medical bills had depleted much of their savings. My mother needed help with the mortgage. I provided it. She needed emotional support. I gave it. Meanwhile, Elise returned to school after a 2-week mourning period, her path unaltered. 5 years ago, Elise was accepted to Carson Medical School, one of the top programs in the country. I still remember the phone call, her voice bubbling with excitement, my mother sobbing with joy in the background. Despite our strained relationship and the growing resentment I tried to suppress, I felt genuine pride in my sister's accomplishment. "I got in, Miranda. I actually got in," she had squealed over the phone. "That's amazing, Elise. Dad would be so proud," I replied, ignoring the twist in my stomach as I calculated what this would mean financially. Carson was private, prestigious, and prohibitively expensive. "Mom says there's not enough in the college fund to cover everything," Elise continued, her voice dropping slightly. "I might need some help with expenses." And there it was, the request I had been expecting but dreading. Despite my own student loans still weighing me down and the financial responsibilities I'd taken on for our mother, I found myself saying, "We'll figure it out. This is your dream." The truth was, I wanted to believe in Elise's dream too. I wanted to think that my sacrifices would mean something, that by helping her become a doctor, I was honoring our father's memory and investing in our family's future. Maybe part of me thought that once she succeeded, she would remember who had helped her get there. Over the next 4 years, I worked my regular job as a regional manager at a retail chain while taking on freelance marketing projects on evenings and weekends. I cut every possible expense in my own life, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates despite being in my 30s, driving a car that broke down with alarming regularity, forgoing vacations and new clothes, and even proper health care for myself. Every semester, I would transfer money to Elise, for tuition gaps, for books, for her apartment in the expensive neighborhood near the medical school, for the study materials she insisted were essential. The amounts grew as she progressed through her program, with clinical rotations requiring special equipment and conference fees adding to the burden. Meanwhile, Elise's life began to change in ways that increasingly excluded me. Her social media filled with photos of her new friends, the children of doctors and hospital administrators, classmates who came from money and privilege. She joined a medical fraternity, went on ski trips I could never afford, and gradually stopped coming home for holidays. "It's just so busy here," she would explain when she missed our mother's birthday or Thanksgiving. "Med school is intense. You wouldn't understand." And perhaps I didn't. But I understood the sting of checking my bank account after sending her money, only to see her posting pictures from a weekend getaway with her new friends. I understood the irony of postponing dental work I needed while she complained about the subpar food at the gala her medical school hosted. Still, I kept helping. Our mother certainly wasn't going to discourage it. "Your sister's going to be saving lives someday," she would remind me whenever I expressed frustration. What could be more important than supporting that? 3 months ago, an embossed invitation arrived in my mail. Elise was graduating, and I was invited to attend the ceremony. Inside was a handwritten note. "Couldn't have done it without you. Love, Elise." Those simple words washed away years of resentment. She did appreciate me. She did recognize my sacrifices. I promptly requested time off work and booked a hotel in Boston for the graduation weekend, stretching my credit card even further to cover the expenses. I spent weeks searching for the perfect graduation gift, eventually selecting a high-quality stethoscope that cost nearly a month's discretionary budget. I had it engraved with her name and a short message, "With pride and love, Miranda." As the day approached, I texted Elise about arrangements, receiving brief but seemingly appreciative responses. Everything seemed set for what I hoped would be a turning point in our relationship, a moment when Elise would transition from student to professional and perhaps begin to see me as an equal rather than just the sister who helped foot the bills. How wrong I was. The Amtrak train to Boston was crowded with families, many obviously headed to various graduation ceremonies with their gift bags and proud smiles. I spent the 4-hour journey from New York reviewing work emails and budget projections. My boss had been reluctant to give me the time off during a critical retail planning period, but I'd promised to stay connected. My hotel was nothing fancy, a budget chain located 20 minutes by subway from Carson Medical School. After checking in, I carefully pressed my one good dress, navy blue with a modest neckline, professional but not flashy. I wanted to look appropriate for the occasion without drawing attention away from Elise's achievement. That evening, I texted my mother, who had flown in the previous day and was staying with Elise at her apartment. Arrived safely. Looking forward to tomorrow. What time should I meet you? Her response came an hour later. Elise says ceremony starts at 10. We need to be there by 9 for seating. Very exciting. I set my alarm for 6 a.m., wanting plenty of time to prepare. Sleep came fitfully, my mind cycling through imagined scenarios of the coming day, Elise's face when she opened my gift, the photos we would take together, the celebratory lunch afterward where perhaps I could finally feel like part of her world. Morning arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and mild temperatures, a beautiful May day for a graduation. I dressed carefully, applied makeup with more attention than usual, and packaged Elise's gift in tissue paper and a gift bag I'd brought from home. I added a card with a heartfelt message about how proud I was, how I had always believed in her. The subway ride to the medical school campus was quick, and I arrived at 8:30, even earlier than planned. The Carson Medical School auditorium was an impressive building with classical columns and broad steps leading to the entrance. Families were already gathering, many dressed in formal attire that made my department store dress feel suddenly inadequate. I texted my mother. I'm here early. Where shall I meet you? We're not there yet. Elise had a breakfast with her roommate Sophia and Sophia's parents. Just get our seats, we'll find you. Slightly disappointed but understanding, I made my way to the check-in table where staff were verifying attendees against guest lists. Good morning, I said to the young woman with an event badge. I'm Miranda Wilson, here for Elise Wilson's graduation. The woman scanned her tablet, frowning slightly. I'm sorry, I don't see a Miranda Wilson on our list. There must be a mistake, I said, pulling out the invitation from my purse. I'm Elise's sister. I received this invitation. She examined the invitation and handed it back. Let me check with my supervisor. A knot began forming in my stomach as she walked away. When she returned with an older woman wearing a event coordinator badge, the knot tightened. Ms. Wilson? I'm Patricia, from Alumni Relations. There seems to be a confusion. We have a strict guest list policy for the ceremony due to space limitations. I understand, but I'm Elise Wilson's sister. I should be on the list. Patricia glanced at her tablet again. I see 3 guests registered for Elise Wilson, Catherine Wilson, her mother, and Gregory and Diana Pierce, listed as family friends. Pierce? Those must be her roommate's parents, I said, confusion giving way to alarm. There has to be a mistake. Can you call Elise? I'm afraid we can't disturb the graduates right now. They're in the preparation area. If you'd like to wait, perhaps your mother can clarify when she arrives. I stepped aside, my hands shaking as I called my mother. No answer. I texted. There's a problem at check-in. I'm not on the guest list. Call me ASAP. 15 minutes passed. Families continued streaming past me into the auditorium. I tried my mother again and again. Finally, my phone rang. Miranda? My mother's voice was hushed, as though she was trying not to be overheard. Where are you? I'm outside the auditorium. They won't let me in. They say I'm not on the list. A pause. Oh dear. Elise mentioned something about limited seating. She could only have 3 guests, and Sophia's parents flew all the way from California. The implications of her words hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying Elise gave my spot to her roommate's parents? They've been very supportive, Miranda. They're both surgeons at UCLA Medical Center. They've been mentoring Elise and might help with her residency placement. Mom, I paid for her to be here. I've been supporting her for 4 years. How could she do this? Another pause. I know you've helped, dear, but this is a very important day for networking. Elise needs to think about her future. As we spoke, I caught sight of them. My mother in an expensive-looking new dress I hadn't seen before, walking alongside a tall, silver-haired couple who exuded wealth and confidence. And between them, radiant in her cap and gown, was Elise. "I see you," I said tersely into the phone. "I'm by the check-in table." My mother spotted me, and her expression flickered with something, guilt, perhaps, or embarrassment. She said something to Elise, whose head snapped in my direction. Rather than approaching me, she pulled out her phone. My phone buzzed with a text. "Please don't make a scene.
Today isn't about you.
We can talk later." I stood frozen, the gift bag suddenly heavy in my hand, as they approached the check-in table. Elise deliberately angled herself away from me, guiding the silver-haired couple, presumably the Pierces, toward the entrance. My mother lagged behind, casting an apologetic glance in my direction before hurrying after them.
Mom.
A security guard approached me. "Do you have a ticket for the ceremony?" "No," I managed, my voice barely audible. "There was a misunderstanding. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move away from the entrance. Ticketed guests only in this area." Humiliation burning through me, I walked down the steps and across the street to a coffee shop, where I ordered a drink I couldn't taste and sat watching the ceremony unfold on social media. Someone was live-streaming it, and I caught glimpses of Elise walking across the stage, accepting her diploma, beaming for photos afterward with my mother and the Pierces. An hour later, my mother texted, "We're going to Le Meridian for lunch with the Pierces. Elise says she'll call you tomorrow. Don't be upset, dear. This is her special day." I didn't respond. Instead, I gathered my things, left Elise's gift on the coffee shop table for someone else to take, and made my way back to the hotel. There, in the anonymous quiet of my room, I finally allowed myself to break down, sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. The betrayal wasn't just about a missed ceremony. It was the culmination of years of sacrifice met with dismissal. It was the revelation that, after everything, I was still outside looking in, not important enough to include in my own sister's milestone moment, despite being instrumental in making it possible. That evening, Instagram showed me what I was missing: Elise and her real guests enjoying an extravagant celebration at one of Boston's finest restaurants. My mother, looking happier than I'd seen her in years, raising a champagne toast. The Pierces presenting Elise with what appeared to be a Tiffany box. The caption read, "So grateful for my amazing support system. Couldn't have done it without my medical school family. #Mbound, #dream come true." There was no mention of me. Sleep eluded me that night. As I lay in the dark hotel room, my mind calculated and recalculated the cost of my devotion to Elise. Not just the emotional price, which was clearly more than I should have paid, but the actual dollars and cents that had flowed from my accounts to hers over the past 4 years. I pulled out my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd maintained, partly to track the financial support for tax purposes, partly to remind myself of what I was working toward. The numbers stared back at me, cold and undeniable. Year 1, $11,340. Year 2, $13,875. Year 3, $15,230. Year 4, $18,650, including the final $9,000 payment 3 months ago. Total, $59,095. These weren't just numbers. They represented countless overtime shifts at Bright Life Retail, where I'd worked my way up to regional manager. They were the freelance marketing projects I took on after exhausting 50-hour workweeks, designing campaigns and managing social media accounts for small businesses while Elise studied. My salary at Bright Life was respectable but modest, $58,000 a year before taxes. The freelance work brought in another $15,000 to $20,000 annually, depending on how many projects I could handle without collapsing from exhaustion. Almost every dollar beyond my basic living expenses had gone to Elise or our mother. The spreadsheet didn't capture everything. It didn't show the dental crown I'd postponed for 3 years because Elise needed a new laptop. It didn't reflect the roommates I'd endured well into my 30s because I couldn't afford my own place. It didn't quantify the vacations untaken, the retirement contributions unmade, the quality of life sacrificed. My own student loans still hovered at $42,000, the interest accumulating faster than I could pay it down while supporting Elise. I'd prioritized her education over clearing my own debt, believing that her success would somehow justify my financial struggles. I scrolled through old email exchanges, finding the one from 3 years ago when Elise had written, "Miranda, I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. When I'm a doctor, I promise I'll pay it forward. I'll help you get back on your feet, and we'll take care of Mom together. This is just temporary. I know it's a lot to ask, but it will all be worth it. You're the best sister anyone could ask for." How hollow those words seem now. There had been emergency requests too. $800 for a critical board exam preparation course, $1,200 when her car needed repairs, $500 for a professional outfit for residency interviews. Each time, I'd rearranged my budget, put more expenses on credit cards, or sold something to make it work. The credit card statements told their own story. Balances hovering near the maximums, minimum payments that barely touched the principal, interest rates that ensured I'd be paying for years to come. My credit score, once excellent, had dropped as my utilization ratio climbed. Last Christmas, when Elise mentioned needing funds for her final semester, I'd made the painful decision to sell my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only valuable heirloom I'd inherited. They'd brought $3,500 at the estate jeweler, enough to cover Elise's request and the holiday gifts I felt obligated to buy. I'd hidden the worst of my financial situation from our mother, not wanting to worry her or create friction between her and Elise. "Everything's fine," I'd assure her when she occasionally asked if I was managing okay. "The store is doing well, and I'm getting great experience." What my mother never knew is that I'd taken a weekend job at a local coffee shop for 6 months when BrightLife had implemented temporary pay cuts during a company restructuring. I'd work Friday night through Sunday evening, sleep 4 hours, then be back at the office Monday morning, functioning on caffeine and determination. The money I sent to Elise represented more than financial support. It was time and health and opportunities one would never get back. It was the engagement ring that David, my boyfriend of 2 years, couldn't afford to buy because our combined finances were so strained by my family obligations. It was the reason he eventually left, tired of postponing our life together while Elise's needs always came first. "I love you, Miranda," he'd said during our final conversation, "but I feel like I'm dating a ghost. You're never fully here. You're always working or worrying about money or handling some crisis for your sister or mother. When is it going to be our turn?" I hadn't had an answer for him then. I didn't have one now. The emails from Elise had changed over time, I noticed as I continued scrolling through my archives. The early messages were effusive with gratitude and detailed explanations of her expenses. Gradually, they became shorter, more entitled. The thank yous disappeared, replaced by assumptions. The explanations gave way to statements. "Need $1,200 for summer clinical rotation. Can you transfer by Friday? Rent due plus new stethoscope. $2,300 total. Car insurance renewed. Sending you the bill." The language had shifted from requests to expectations, from gratitude to entitlement. And I had allowed it, making excuses for her busy schedule, her stress, her focus on studies. What had started as a loan had morphed into a gift somewhere along the way. In the beginning, we'd both spoken of repayment after she established her career. Then the conversations became vaguer, with references to helping me someday or taking care of our mother, once she settled. I opened another spreadsheet, this one mapping out my financial future. The projections were bleak. At my current rate, I wouldn't be debt-free until my mid-40s. Retirement would likely be delayed well beyond the standard age. Homeownership seemed like a fantasy rather than an achievable goal. All this sacrifice, and Elise couldn't even save me a seat at her graduation. The night passed with these thoughts cycling through my mind, each calculation adding to the growing weight of resentment and disbelief. By morning, exhaustion had given way to a cold clarity. I had been used. Not just by Elise, but by our mother too, both of them happy to take what I offered while expecting me to remain invisibly in the background of their lives. I'd planned to return home that day, But as dawn broke over Boston, I made a different decision. I would stay one more day. Before I left the city, Elise would hear exactly what her education had cost. Morning brought no relief from the storm of emotions that had kept me awake. I checked out of my hotel but left my suitcase with a concierge, explaining I would return for it later. Then I took the subway back to the neighborhood near Carson Medical School, where Elise had an apartment she shared with Sophia. Social media had been active overnight. New photos showed Elise and her medical school family continuing the celebration at an upscale club. My mother appeared in several images, looking decades younger as she laughed alongside the Pierces, who seemed to have fully embraced her into their circle. A fresh post from 2 hours ago showed Elise at a graduation brunch at Sophia's apartment, my sister radiant in a sundress I didn't recognize, surrounded by gifts and flowers. The caption read, "Round 2 of celebrations. So blessed to have these amazing people in my life. Hashtag full heart, hashtag future doctors of America." I knew where she would be. The confrontation I had been avoiding for years could no longer be postponed. The walk to Elise's building took 15 minutes, each step strengthening my resolve. This wasn't about ruining her celebration. It was about finally speaking my truth after years of silent sacrifice. Elise's apartment was in a renovated brownstone in one of Boston's most desirable neighborhoods. The contrast with my shared walk-up in Queens couldn't have been more stark. I pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B, half expecting to be ignored. Instead, the intercom crackled. "Hello?" It was Elise's voice, slightly slurred from what I assumed was celebratory champagne. "It's Miranda." My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, steady, emotionless. A long pause followed. Then, we're kind of in the middle of brunch. I'm not leaving until we talk, Elise." Another pause.
Fine.
"Come up." The buzzer sounded, and I pushed through the heavy door into a lobby with marble floors and fresh flower arrangements. The elevator carried me to the 3rd floor, where Elise was waiting in her doorway, arms crossed defensively. She looked different somehow, not just the expensive sundress and professional makeup, but something in her posture and expression that seemed to have transformed her from my little sister into a stranger. "This isn't a good time," she said quietly as I approached. "We have guests." "It never is a good time with you," I replied, keeping my voice low but firm. "But after yesterday, you owe me a conversation." Her eyes flashed with annoyance. "Look, I'm sorry about the ceremony. There were limited seats, and the Pierces have been really important mentors for me. More important than the sister who paid your rent for 4 years? Who sent you $9,000 just 3 months ago for your final semester." Elise glanced nervously over her shoulder toward the sounds of conversation and laughter coming from inside. "Can we not do this right now? I'll call you tomorrow, I promise."
No.
"We're doing this now." Something in my tone must have convinced her I wouldn't back down, because she stepped into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her.
Fine.
"Say what you need to say." "Why wasn't I on the guest list yesterday?" She sighed, looking more irritated than remorseful. "I told you there were limited spots. The Pierces flew in from California specifically for this, and they've been helping me network for residency positions. It was a professional decision." "A professional decision," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Is that what I am to you now? Not family, just a professional connection that didn't make the cut." "You're being dramatic."
It was just a ceremony.
"You can see the photos." "Just a ceremony I helped pay for. Just a degree I worked overtime to fund. Just a dream I sacrificed my own life to support." Elise's expression hardened. "No one asked you to sacrifice anything, Miranda. You offered to help." The callousness of her response left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "What did you tell them about me? The Pierces, your friends, do they even know I exist?" She looked away, and in that avoidance, I found my answer.
Wow.
"So, I'm not just uninvited, I'm erased." "It's not like that," she protested weakly. "It's just you wouldn't fit in with these people, Miranda. They're my future colleagues, connections I need for my career." They come from a different world. A world I helped you access, I reminded her. Or did you forget who paid for the application fees to Carson? Who covered your rent when you did that unpaid research assistantship with Dr. Brennan? Who bought the laptop you wrote your applications on? I'm grateful for your help, but are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're ashamed of me. What did you tell them, Elise? That you put yourself through medical school? That you're self-made? Her silence was confirmation enough. You know what's ironic? I continued, my voice breaking slightly. I was proud of you. Despite everything, I was so genuinely proud of what you accomplished. I just wanted to be there to see it. The apartment door opened wider, and our mother appeared, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm when she saw me. Miranda? What are you doing here? We thought you'd gone back to New York. I wanted to congratulate my sister properly, since I wasn't allowed to do it yesterday. My mother's face fell. Oh, sweetheart. We've been over this. The seating was limited and, stop it, Mom, I interrupted. Just stop with excuses. We both know what happened. Elise decided I wasn't important enough or impressive enough to be included in her big day, despite everything I've done to make it possible. Miranda, why must you always ruin special occasions? My mother sighed, the familiar refrain cutting deeper than she could know. How many times had she said those exact words throughout our lives? When I'd questioned the expensive car Elise received for her 16th birthday, while I'd been given driving lessons and bus fare. When I'd pointed out the disparity in attention to our accomplishments. When I'd expressed hurt at being overlooked or undervalued. Always, it was me who was ruining things by naming the inequality. Before I could respond, two more figures appeared in the doorway, an elegant couple in their early 60s who could only be the Pierces. Is everything all right? The woman asked, her gaze moving curiously between us. Everything's fine, Diana, my mother said quickly. This is Miranda, Elise's sister. Sister? Diana Pierce's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. I thought you mentioned a cousin from upstate? The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to Elise, whose face had drained of color. A cousin from upstate? That's what I am to you now. Elise, darling, you never mentioned a sister, Gregory Pierce said, his tone pleasant but eyes sharp with interest. And from New York City, not upstate it seems. It's complicated, Elise mumbled, not meeting anyone's eyes. Not really, I said, finding a strange calm in the midst of this revelation. I'm Elise's older sister. I've been helping support her through medical school for the past 4 years while working as a retail manager in Queens. Not very glamorous, I suppose, which might explain why she's been keeping me a secret. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Diana Pierce recovered first, extending her hand with practiced social grace. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Miranda. Why don't you join us for brunch? We were just hearing about Elise's plans for residency. Yes, do come in, Gregory added, though his eyes had taken on a more assessing quality as he looked between Elise and me. I hesitated, then nodded. Perhaps it was masochistic, but I wanted to see this world my sister had created for herself, the one that had no place for me. The apartment was stunning, high ceilings, hardwood floors, and modern furniture that certainly hadn't come from the budget retailers where I shopped. Fresh flowers adorned every surface, and a catered brunch spread covered the dining table. I recognized none of it from my previous visits to Boston, when Elise had always suggested meeting at restaurants rather than inviting me to her home. Miranda works in retail management. My mother was explaining to the Pierces, her tone suggesting she was describing an unfortunate medical condition. She's very dedicated to her career. How interesting, Diana said politely. Which company? Bright Life, I answered. I'm a regional manager overseeing 8 stores in the New York area. Oh, I love Bright Life, Sophia exclaimed, the first genuine reaction I'd received. Their sustainable clothing line is amazing. Thank you, I said, offering her a small smile. At least someone in the room didn't seem to find my career embarrassing. So, Elise tells us she put herself through medical school, Gregory said, helping himself to more mimosa. Such dedication. Sophia was fortunate to have our support, but we always admire those who make their own way. My eyes locked with Elise's across the room. This was her moment to correct the narrative, to acknowledge the truth. Instead, she looked away, reaching for her champagne glass with trembling fingers. Actually, I said quietly, Elise had quite a bit of support. I've contributed nearly $60,000 to her education over the past 4 years. The room went silent. Gregory Pierce set down his glass slowly. I see, he said, his gaze now unmistakably critical as he looked at Elise. That's quite a significant contribution from a sister. Miranda, my mother hissed, this is hardly the time or place. When would be a good time, Mom? After another 4 years of pretending? After Elise has completely erased me from her story. Elise finally found her voice, though it was brittle with anger. I can't believe you're doing this. You're embarrassing me in front of everyone because you're jealous of my success. Jealous? I repeated, incredulous. I'm not jealous, Elise. I'm hurt.
I'm betrayed.
I've given up years of my life to help you achieve your dreams, and you couldn't even acknowledge me at your graduation. I would have been a doctor with or without your help, she snapped. Don't act like you're the reason I'm here. The cruelty of her words silenced the room. Even my mother looked shocked. Perhaps we should give the family some privacy, Diana Pierce suggested tactfully, setting down her napkin. Sophia, why don't we step out for a bit? No need, I said, rising from my seat. I was just leaving. I moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. Despite everything, there was still a part of me that hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Elise would stop me, apologize, show some recognition of what her words had done. Instead, she stared stonily ahead, her expression a mix of embarrassment and resentment. My mother looked torn, her gaze darting between us before settling on Elise with a familiar look of concern for her favorite daughter. Congratulations on graduating, Dr. Wilson, I said quietly. I hope it was worth it. With that, I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. There was a certain dignity and restraint in not slamming doors or raising voices. I'd said my piece, revealed the truth, and now I would leave with whatever shreds of self-respect I could gather. As I waited for the elevator, I heard the apartment door open again. Turning, I half expected, hoped, perhaps, to see Elise. Instead, it was Gregory Pierce. Ms. Wilson, he called, walking briskly toward me. A moment, please. I waited, unsure what more could be said. I want to thank you for your honesty back there, he said when he reached me. It can't have been easy. It wasn't. He nodded thoughtfully. I've been in medicine for 35 years, and I've seen many young doctors start their careers. The ones who forget where they came from, who build their success on unacknowledged sacrifice, they rarely become the kind of physicians I would want treating my family. He handed me a business card. If you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to call. And for what it's worth, I think your sister has much to learn from you about integrity. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside, the business card a small weight in my palm. As the doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of Gregory Pierce's thoughtful expression and wondered if Elise had any idea what her deception might have cost her professionally.
It didn't matter now.
I had a train to catch, a life to rebuild, and for the first time in years, only myself to worry about. Speaking of rebuilding lives after family betrayal, I know many of you watching have experienced similar painful revelations. The confrontation with Elise was just the beginning of my journey toward healing and independence. If you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who took advantage of your generosity, leave a comment below about how you handled it. Did you confront them like I did, or find another way forward? Your experiences might help others who are still finding their voice. Now, let's continue with what happened when I returned home to discover just how deep this family deception went. The train ride back to New York felt interminable. I sat with my forehead pressed against the window, watching the landscape blur as we sped south, feeling as though I was returning to a life that no longer fit. Something fundamental had shifted inside me during that confrontation in Boston. A lifelong pattern of accommodation and self-sacrifice had finally broken. My apartment building in Queens was a far cry from Elise's elegant brownstone. The elevator was perpetually out of order, meaning a 5-flight climb with my weekend bag. The hallway smelled faintly of someone's attempt to mask cigarette smoke with cheap air freshener. But it was home, or at least the closest thing I had to one. When I reached my door, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The frame showed subtle signs of forced entry, small splintered areas that hadn't been there when I left. My heart rate accelerated as I cautiously pushed the door open. The apartment had been searched, thoroughly, but not destructively. Drawers were closed, but contents rearranged. Closets had been gone through, items shifted, but not strewn about. This wasn't a random break-in. This was someone looking for something specific. My laptop was still on the desk. A common thief would have taken it. My jewelry box remained, though the few modest pieces I owned had been disturbed. But when I went to the filing cabinet where I kept important documents, I found the lock broken and several folders missing. The financial records. The spreadsheets I'd printed documenting my support of Elise. Copies of transfers and payments. All gone. A cold certainty settled over me. There were only 2 people who had keys to my apartment, my mother and Elise. And only one of them had a motive to remove evidence of financial support. I called my mother immediately.
She didn't answer.
I left a voicemail, my voice tight with controlled anger. Someone broke into my apartment and took my financial records. Call me back.
Now.
While waiting for her response, I continued assessing what else was missing. The small lockbox where I kept family heirlooms had been emptied, my grandmother's remaining jewelry, my father's watch, old photographs. Not items of significant monetary value, but irreplaceable connections to my past. My phone rang an hour later. What do you mean, broken into? My mother's voice was strained, unconvincing in its surprise. You know exactly what I mean. Where are my financial records? Where are Grandma's things? A long pause. Miranda, you need to understand. After that scene you caused this morning, Elise was concerned about her reputation. Those medical school connections are very important for her future. The casual admission of their betrayal left me breathless. You're saying you broke into my home and stole my possessions because Elise was worried I might what? Prove I helped her? Tell people the truth. You've always been so dramatic. Elise just needed to protect herself. Those Pierces are very influential in the medical community. If they thought she'd been misleading them about her background. So, you committed a crime. Breaking and entering, theft. Don't be ridiculous. We have keys. And they're family documents, family heirlooms. Your father would have wanted Elise to have those things anyway, for her children someday. The dismissal of my property rights, of my very personhood, was so profound I couldn't immediately respond. When I did, my voice was dangerously calm. I'm going to ask you one more time. Where are my things? Somewhere safe. When you calm down and stop threatening Elise's career, maybe we can discuss returning some items. Threatening her career? By existing? By expecting basic acknowledgement of my support. By making scenes and embarrassing her in front of important connections. My mother's voice rose. She worked so hard to get where she is. Your father always wanted her to be a doctor, you know that. It was his dream for her. And what about his dreams for me? I asked quietly. My mother sighed impatiently. Miranda, be realistic. Your father knew your capabilities. He was proud of you in his way, but Elise was always the special one. That's just how it was. The casual cruelty of her assessment, delivered as though it was an obvious, incontestable fact, cracked something open inside me. A question formed, one I never thought to ask before. Mom, did Dad leave a life insurance policy? The sudden silence on the other end of the line was answer enough. He did, didn't he? And you never told me. It wasn't relevant to you, she finally said, her tone defensive. The policy was modest, just enough to help with Elise's undergraduate expenses. How modest? Another pause. $50,000. The figure hit me like a physical blow.
$50,000.
While I'd been working myself to exhaustion, draining my savings, accumulating debt, There had been money all along. Money that could have eased the burden, that should have been shared. You lied to me, I whispered. All these years, you let me believe we were struggling, that Elise needed my help to stay in school. The money wouldn't have lasted through medical school, my mother argued. And besides, your father was specific about what it was for. In his last days, he made me promise it would go toward Elise becoming a doctor. I thought back to those final months of my father's life, to the quiet conversations I'd sometimes glimpsed between him and my mother, the way they'd stopped talking when I entered the room. Had they been planning this deception even then?
I don't believe you, I said.
Dad wouldn't have left me with nothing while giving everything to Elise. Believe what you want, my mother replied, her tone hardening. But your father knew where the family's future lay. Elise has real potential, Miranda. She's going to be somebody important. The implication that I wasn't somebody important stung, but it wasn't new. It was merely the most explicit articulation of a message I'd been receiving my entire life. I'm going to my office now, I said, sudden determination filling me. I'm going to report the break-in to the police, and then I'm going to contact a lawyer about the theft of my property and the life insurance policy. Don't be ridiculous. No one will believe you. It's your word against ours, and we have the paperwork now.
We'll see about that.
I ended the call and immediately changed the locks on my apartment door, a process that took most of the afternoon and cost money I couldn't really spare. That evening, I went to my father's old email account, something I'd maintained the password for but rarely accessed, finding it too painful in the years after his death. Now, I began a systematic search through years of archived messages, looking for any mention of life insurance, financial planning, or provisions for his daughters. It took hours, but eventually, I found what I was looking for: correspondence with his insurance agent from 7 years ago, discussing the policy details and beneficiaries. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. The policy hadn't been for $50,000. It had been for $150,000, with clear instructions that it should be divided. $50,000 for my mother's immediate needs, $50,000 for Elise's education, and $50,000 for mine. Further searching revealed emails to our family accountant, expressing concern that I had taken on too much student debt for my MBA program and his intention to help me complete my education after his treatment was finished. There were even draft emails to me that he'd never sent, saved in his folders, discussing financial plans he was making for both his daughters' futures. He had cared. He had planned for me too, and they had hidden it all. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began reaching out to family, friends, and my father's old colleagues, seeking any information about his final wishes and financial arrangements. Most were surprised to hear from me after so many years, but several conversations yielded disturbing confirmations. I always thought it was strange, said Margaret, my father's former assistant, when your mother said Robert had left everything for Elise's education. He talked about both his girls all the time, always so proud of your business sense, Miranda. He used to say you had his head for numbers. Another family friend, Edward, was more direct. Your father told me explicitly that he'd set up equal provisions for both his daughters. He was worried about you dropping out of your MBA program to help during his illness. He made me promise to remind your mother about the education fund if anything happened to him. I did try to bring it up at the funeral, but your mother was unreceptive. The most devastating revelation came from my godmother, Janet, who I hadn't spoken to in years. She'd moved to Arizona after a falling out with my mother that I'd never fully understood. Oh, Miranda, she sighed when I reached her by phone. I've been hoping you'd call someday. I tried to stay in touch after Robert died, but your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome. Why? Because I questioned her about the life insurance and your father's wishes. I knew what he wanted: equal treatment for both his daughters. When I saw how everything was going to Elise while you struggled, I confronted Catherine. She told me it was none of my business, that Robert had changed his mind in his final days and wanted everything to go to Elise's medical education. Did he? I asked, though I already suspected the answer.
No, sweetheart. He didn't.
In fact. She paused. I have something you should see. Robert sent me letters during his final months. He was worried about you, about how your education had been interrupted. He felt tremendous guilt about it. Letters?
Can you send them to me?
I'll do better than that. I've kept them safe all these years, thinking someday you might need to know the truth. I'll overnight them to you. 2 days later, a package arrived containing a dozen handwritten letters from my father, dated during the last 3 months of his life. They detailed his concerns, his plans, his hopes for both his daughters. And they confirmed what I now knew. My mother and Elise had systematically diverted resources meant for me, while encouraging me to further deplete my own finances to support a lifestyle and education that had already been funded. In one particularly painful passage, my father wrote, "Janet, I worry about Miranda. She's always been the responsible one, too responsible sometimes. She takes care of everyone but herself. I've tried to set things up so she can return to her MBA program after I'm gone, but I fear Catherine will prioritize Elise as she always has. Please look out for Miranda if you can. Remind her that her dreams matter too." Another revelation came when I discovered that the full scholarship I'd believed I'd received for my undergraduate education, the one my parents had celebrated with such relief, had never existed. My father had been paying the tuition all along but had created the scholarship story so that the family resources could ostensibly go to Elise's more demanding educational path. The web of deception was so intricate, so long-standing, that I felt as though the ground beneath my feet had vanished. My entire adult life had been built around a fundamental falsehood, that I was the strong one who didn't need support, while Elise was the fragile talent who required every advantage. When I called my mother to confront her with these discoveries, her response was chilling in its lack of remorse. "What difference does it make now? It's all in the past. Elise is a doctor, just like your father wanted. She'll have a wonderful life, and someday when she's established, I'm sure she'll help you out." "That's not the point," I said, my voice shaking. "You stole from me. You took what was rightfully mine, and then manipulated me into giving more. You chose to help her, Miranda. No one forced you to send money or work those extra jobs. That was your decision. Not my fault you didn't save for yourself." The conversation ended there, with no acknowledgement, no apology, no recognition of the damage done. Just a cold dismissal of my feelings and a rewriting of history to absolve themselves of responsibility. That night, I received a text message from Elise. "Mom told me what you've been saying. Stop trying to ruin my life because yours didn't turn out the way you wanted. I earned my MD. You chose your path." I didn't respond. There were no words that could bridge the chasm that had opened between us, not just of anger or hurt, but of fundamentally different realities. In their world, I was a jealous sister trying to diminish Elise's accomplishments. In mine, I was a victim of years of calculated exploitation by the people who should have protected me most. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by the evidence of my father's true wishes and intentions, I made a decision. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, justice, and reclaiming my own life from the role I'd been assigned in my family's distorted narrative. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of holding them accountable, not out of vengeance, but out of respect for my father's memory and for the self I'd neglected for far too long. The morning after my discoveries, I called my supervisor at Bright Life and requested 2 weeks of medical leave. Angela had been my boss for 3 years and knew me as someone who rarely took sick days, much less extended leave. "Is everything okay, Miranda?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "No," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. "I'm dealing with some serious family issues that have affected my health. I need time to address them." "Take whatever time you need," she said without hesitation. "Your stores are consistently our top performers, and you've built a strong team. They can handle things while you focus on yourself." Her immediate support, so different from the conditional love I'd grown accustomed to in my family, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. With 2 weeks secured, I began methodically rebuilding what had been taken from me. My first appointment was with a financial advisor recommended by one of my store managers. Thomas Kane specialized in helping people recover from financial abuse, though I'd flinched when he used that term to describe my situation. "What you're describing is classic financial exploitation," he explained gently during our consultation. "Family members using manipulation, guilt, and false premises to extract resources from you while concealing assets that should have been partially yours." He helped me catalog the full extent of the damage. $59,095 directly transferred to Elise, approximately $28,000 in interest on credit cards and loans I'd taken to support her, delayed retirement contributions valued at nearly $45,000 in projected growth, and the missing $50,000 from my father's life insurance. All told, we're looking at financial damage of approximately $180,000, Thomas said, his expression grave. And that's not counting opportunity costs or quality of life impacts. The figure was staggering, especially considering my current financial state. Thomas helped me develop a recovery plan, starting with consolidating my high-interest debt and creating a budget that prioritized my needs for the first time in years. My next appointment was with Diane Freeman, an attorney specializing in family financial disputes. I brought copies of everything I discovered: my father's letters, email printouts, my own financial records, thankfully backed up on cloud storage, and documentation of the recent theft from my apartment. "You have a strong case for financial recovery," Diane advised after reviewing the materials. "The life insurance situation is particularly clear-cut. Your father's intentions were documented, and your mother's actions constituted a breach of fiduciary duty." "What about the more recent theft?" I asked. "My mother basically admitted over the phone that she and Elise broke into my apartment and took my documents and family heirlooms." "That's a criminal matter," Diane explained. "You'll need to file a police report. It will strengthen our civil case, but more importantly, it creates a formal record of their actions." Filing the police report was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Standing at the precinct desk, giving the officer details about my own mother and sister's actions, felt like the ultimate betrayal of family loyalty. But as Diane had gently reminded me, they had betrayed that loyalty long ago. I was simply acknowledging what had already occurred. As I left the police station, my phone exploded with notifications. My mother had been contacted by the police and had immediately called Elise, who was now blowing up my phone with increasingly frantic and angry messages. "How could you file a police report against your own family? Are you trying to ruin my career before it even starts? Take it back before this goes on my record, and I can't get my medical license. You're just jealous and bitter. This is pathetic, Miranda." I silenced my phone without responding. Diane had advised against any direct communication while we prepared the legal case. The next shock came 3 days later when I received a call from my bank's fraud department. They had detected suspicious activity: loan applications submitted in my name for 2 new credit cards and a personal loan totaling $35,000. Someone had used my social security number, birth date, and other personal information that would have been in the documents taken from my apartment. "Ms. Wilson, did you apply for these credit accounts?" the fraud investigator asked. "No, absolutely not. We thought it seemed unusual given your credit history. We've flagged them as fraudulent and put a freeze on your credit file, but you'll need to file another police report for identity theft." A quick check of my credit report confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't the first time my identity had been used without my knowledge. There were 2 older credit cards I didn't recognize, opened 2 years ago during Elise's 3rd year of medical school. They were maxed out at their combined $12,000 limit, with multiple late payments that had damaged my credit score. The identity theft revelation necessitated another police report, more documentation, and hours spent on the phone with credit bureaus and card issuers. Each discovery felt like another betrayal, another confirmation that my role in my family had been reduced to that of a resource to be exploited. A week into my leave, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Dr. Samuel Whitman, the residency director at Massachusetts General Hospital, where Elise had been accepted for her internal medicine residency. "Ms. Wilson, I apologize for contacting you directly," he began, his tone professional but concerned. "Your sister listed you as a character reference on her application, and some information has come to our attention that requires clarification." My heart raced. I hadn't expected my actions to impact Elise's residency position. Despite everything, I didn't want to destroy her career. I just wanted accountability and recovery of what was rightfully mine. What kind of information? I asked cautiously. We've received a report about potential legal issues involving theft and identity fraud. As you can imagine, character and integrity are paramount in our profession. Before we make any decisions, we wanted to speak with you directly. I faced a momentous choice. I could downplay the situation to protect Elise's career, or I could tell the truth and potentially derail the medical future she'd worked toward, the future I'd sacrificed so much to help her achieve. After a moment's reflection, I chose a middle path. Dr. Whitman, my sister and I are currently involved in a family dispute over financial matters and inheritance. There are ongoing legal investigations, but I would prefer not to detail them at this time. What I can tell you is that Elise is an extremely intelligent and dedicated student of medicine. Whatever is happening between us personally should be separated from her professional capabilities. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I appreciate your candor and restraint, Ms. Wilson. Residency positions are contingent upon both professional competence and ethical conduct. We'll need to have a discussion with Elise about these concerns. After that call, Elise's messages changed from angry accusations to desperate pleas. Her residency position, the culmination of her medical education, was in jeopardy. My mother began calling hourly, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful begging to vicious accusations. How could you do this to your sister? After everything we've done for you. The irony of that statement would have been amusing if it weren't so painful. My boss, Angela, called midway through my second week of leave, ostensibly to check on my well-being. After expressing genuine concern about my health, she surprised me with an unexpected opportunity. Miranda, I should have mentioned this earlier, but with everything going on, there's an opening for a divisional director position at headquarters. It would mean relocating to Chicago, a significant salary increase, and more strategic responsibility. Several of us in senior management think you'd be perfect for it. The timing seemed almost cosmic, a chance to start fresh in a new city, away from the painful proximity of my family. I'd be very interested, I told her. When would they need to know? They're interviewing next week. I know you're on leave, but if you're up for it, I can arrange a video interview. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope, a path forward that wasn't defined by the tangled history with my family. Toward the end of my leave, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. The security buzzer rang and the building manager announced, "There's a woman here causing quite a scene, insisting she needs to see you. Says she's your mother." I considered refusing, but realized this confrontation was inevitable. "Send her up, please." My mother looked years older than she had at Elise's graduation, just 2 weeks earlier. The carefully maintained appearance had given way to uncombed hair and a rumpled blouse. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. "You have to drop these charges," she said without preamble as she pushed past me into the apartment. "Elise might lose her residency. Everything we've all worked for will be ruined. Everything I've worked for was already taken from me," I replied calmly. "I'm not dropping anything. The legal process will determine what happens next." "How can you be so cold? This is your sister's entire future." "What about my future, Mom? The one Dad wanted to protect too? The one you and Elise stole from me piece by piece." She collapsed onto my couch, sudden tears flowing. "We needed the money more than you did. You were always so capable, so independent. Elise is different. She needs support, guidance." That's the story you've told yourselves to justify using me. But it's not true. Elise is intelligent and resourceful. She could have found other ways to fund her education. Loans, scholarships, work-study. The same ways I was trying to fund mine before I dropped everything to help during Dad's illness. "Your father wanted. I know exactly what Dad wanted." I interrupted, my voice firm. "I have his letters." He wanted both his daughters to succeed, to support each other, to share what he left behind. You're the one who decided Elise deserved everything, and I deserved nothing. My mother's expression shifted from pleading to cold anger. You've always been jealous of her. Always. Even as a child, you resented the attention she got. This isn't about childhood jealousy. This is about adult exploitation. You used me, Mom. You took advantage of my love and loyalty and sense of responsibility. You concealed an inheritance that was partly mine, then watched me work multiple jobs and go into debt to support Elise, all while knowing there was money that should have been mine. I did what I thought was best for the family.
No.
You did what was easiest for you and best for Elise. I wasn't even a consideration. We talked in circles for nearly an hour, my mother cycling through tears, accusations, justifications, and eventually threats. If you continue with this, you'll never be welcome in this family again, she declared as a parting shot at my door. Elise, and I will never forgive you. I'm not sure there's a family left to be welcome in, I replied sadly. And forgiveness goes both ways. After she left, I filed for a restraining order, not because I feared physical harm, but because the constant harassment and emotional manipulation were impeding my recovery. The court granted a temporary order prohibiting both my mother and Elise from contacting me directly or coming to my home or workplace. The silence that followed was both a relief and a new kind of pain. Despite everything, they were the only family I had known. The complete severing of those bonds, even toxic ones, left an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. That emptiness was partially filled by an unexpected delivery the following day, a box with no return address, containing family photographs, my father's college ring, and a small leather diary I recognized as his. Inside the front cover was a note in unfamiliar handwriting. These belong to your father. He would want you to have them. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I never discovered who sent the package, though I suspected it might have been one of my father's old friends or colleagues who had heard about the family conflict. My father's diary was a revelation, his private thoughts during the last year of his life, including his worries about the family dynamics he was leaving behind. One entry in particular brought me to tears. Miranda came by today to help organize my medications. She's put her whole life on hold for me, never complaining even though I know how much she was enjoying her MBA program. She has so much potential in business, just like I did at her age. I've arranged for her to have the means to return to school after I'm gone, though I worry Catherine won't honor my wishes. Miranda deserves her chance to shine, free from the caretaker role she's taken on for so long. I hope someday both my girls will understand how deeply I love them, each for their unique gifts. Those words, written in my father's familiar script, began the true healing process. Whatever happened with the legal cases, whatever my mother and sister chose to believe, I now had confirmation of what I'd always hoped was true. My father had seen me, valued me, and wanted me to thrive. As my leave from work neared its end, I interviewed for the Chicago position via video call. Despite everything, I felt a clarity and confidence I hadn't experienced in years. When asked about my leadership philosophy, I spoke about empowerment, transparency, and the balance between supporting others and maintaining healthy boundaries, lessons learned at tremendous personal cost. The interview panel seemed impressed, and 2 days later, Angela called with the news. The position was mine if I wanted it. A fresh start in a new city, with a salary that would allow me to begin rebuilding my financial security. I accepted immediately, feeling the first stirrings of excitement about my future, a future that, for once, would be shaped by my own choices rather than by the demands and manipulations of others. The day before I was due to return to work, I received one final unexpected communication, an email from Elise sent through my lawyer, the only permissible channel under the restraining order. The hospital is requiring me to take a leave of absence pending investigation. I might lose everything I've worked for. I hope you're satisfied. There was no acknowledgement of her actions, no apology for the theft or fraud or years of exploitation. Just blame, as though I was responsible for the consequences of her choices. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned my attention to the practical tasks of planning my move to Chicago, working with my lawyer on the ongoing legal cases, and beginning therapy to process the complex grief of losing my family not to death, but to the revelation of who they truly were. For the first time in my adult life, I was putting myself first. It felt foreign, uncomfortable at times, but also right. My father had wanted this for me. The chance to pursue my own dreams, unburdened by obligations manufactured to serve others' needs. As I packed up my small apartment, sorting through possessions accumulated over years of making do with less so Elise could have more, I found myself letting go of items I'd once clung to, physical reminders of sacrifices that had never been acknowledged or valued. The lightness that came with each discard was unexpected and welcome, a physical manifestation of the emotional unburdening I was undertaking. Chicago represented not just a new job, but a new identity, one not defined by being Elise's supportive sister or my mother's reliable daughter, but simply as Miranda, a woman with her own ambitions, strengths, and worth. The legal processes would continue, likely for months or even years. The emotional healing would take even longer. But for the first time since standing outside that graduation ceremony with an invitation that meant nothing, I felt something like hope, not for reconciliation with those who had betrayed me, but for reconciliation with myself and the life I deserve to live. Family trauma affects so many of us in ways we don't always recognize until we're forced to confront it. If you've experienced similar family betrayal, you might understand how difficult it was for me to take these steps toward justice and healing. The journey through legal battles and emotional recovery was challenging, but nothing compared to what happened next. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to completely rebuild your life after family betrayal. Was there a moment when you realized your worth wasn't defined by your family's treatment of you? Now, let me tell you about the unexpected encounter that changed everything a year later. 1 year after the confrontation at Elise's graduation, my life bore little resemblance to the one I'd been living. Chicago had become home. My role as divisional director at Bright Life corporate headquarters was challenging and fulfilling, and I'd moved into a small but charming condo in Lincoln Park, the first place that had ever been truly mine. The legal proceedings had progressed steadily, if slowly. The identity theft case was the most straightforward. Elise had been charged with 2 felony counts after overwhelming evidence linked her to the fraudulent accounts. She accepted a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and community service, avoiding jail time but creating a permanent record that would follow her professional career. The civil case regarding my father's life insurance policy had resulted in a settlement. My mother, facing documentation of my father's wishes and fearing public exposure, agreed to repay the $50,000 that should have been mine, plus interest. It wasn't the full amount I'd lost over the years, but it was significant, enough to clear my remaining student loans and begin rebuilding my retirement savings. The personal growth had been even more significant than the financial recovery. Weekly therapy sessions had helped me recognize and begin healing from the lifetime of conditional love and subtle manipulation that had shaped my self-perception. I developed new friendships in Chicago, joined a hiking club, and even started dating again, cautiously, mindful of my tendency to overgive in relationships. My credit score had recovered to the point where I qualified for my condo mortgage, a milestone that brought unexpected tears when the loan officer called with the approval. For the first time, I was building equity in something tangible, creating stability for myself rather than sacrificing it for others. I maintained the restraining order against my mother, though we had limited contact through our respective lawyers. Elise had respected the no-contact order completely after her initial email, whether out of legal caution or genuine remorse, I couldn't tell. News about Elise came through mutual acquaintances and, occasionally, social media. Her residency at Massachusetts General had indeed been rescinded following the identity theft charges. The prestigious position she'd been groomed for had evaporated, replaced by a less competitive residency at a smaller hospital in New Jersey. Her relationship with the Pierces had evidently cooled after the full story emerged. Her Instagram no longer featured their elegant gatherings or mentorship celebrations. I took no pleasure in these developments. Despite everything, I didn't want Elise to suffer or fail. I simply wanted accountability and the chance to rebuild my own life without continued exploitation. Her setbacks were the natural consequences of her actions, not revenge I had sought. In early spring, I received an unexpected email from Walter Griffith, my father's former business partner. They had run a successful commercial real estate firm together for 15 years before selling to a larger company shortly before my father's diagnosis. Miranda, the email began, I've been trying to track you down for some time. I recently spoke with Janet and learned about the situation with your family. There's something important we need to discuss regarding your father's estate. Are you available for a call this week? Curious and slightly apprehensive, I arranged a phone conversation for the following day. Miranda, it's good to hear your voice, Walter said when we connected. It's been too long. I should have reached out years ago, but I respected your father's instructions to wait. Wait for what? I asked, puzzled. Robert and I had a separate arrangement outside of the family estate. When we sold the business, we each made several investments with our proceeds. One of those investments was a small commercial property in downtown Minneapolis that has since been developed into a successful office complex. I listened, uncertain where this was heading. Robert set up his share of that investment in a trust that would mature on your 35th birthday. He was explicit that neither your mother nor Elise was to know about it. He called it your Fresh Start Fund. My breath caught. My 35th birthday is next month. Exactly. The trust has been generating rental income and appreciating for nearly 8 years now. I've been managing it as the trustee, per Robert's instructions. Miranda, your father set aside this investment specifically for you to complete your MBA or pursue whatever dreams you might have. The current value is approximately $220,000. The figure left me speechless. Not just for the amount, which was life-changing, but for what it represented. Irrefutable proof that my father had seen me, valued me, and planned for my future independently of Elise. He was so proud of your business acumen, Walter continued into my silence. He always said you had his head for investment and strategy. This was his way of ensuring you could pursue that path, regardless of family circumstances. Tears streamed down my face as Walter explained the details of the trust, the paperwork required, and the process for transferring the assets. My father had created a safety net for me that my mother and sister had never discovered, a final act of paternal love that arrived precisely when I needed it most. 2 weeks after Walter's call, I enrolled in an executive MBA program at Northwestern University. The trust would cover tuition and living expenses during the intensive program, allowing me to take a sabbatical from Bright Life with the promise of returning to an even more senior position afterward. The path my father had envisioned for me, the one interrupted by his illness and death, was finally clear again. I didn't share news of the inheritance with my mother or Elise. The trust had been explicitly structured to exclude them, and I honored my father's wishes for privacy. This wasn't about revenge or gloating. It was about quietly reclaiming the future that had been intended for me all along. Winter came early to Chicago that year, with a November snowstorm that blanketed the city in white. I was in my second quarter of the MBA program, thriving in the academic environment and building connections with classmates who valued my experience and perspective. The knock on my door came at 9:30 p.m. during the height of the storm. Peering through the peephole, I was stunned to see Elise standing in my hallway, shivering in an inadequate coat, snow melting in her hair. My first instinct was to call the police. She was violating the restraining order. But something in her posture, the uncharacteristic defeat in her stance, gave me pause. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "What are you doing here, Elise?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. She looked up, her face thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely audible. "My flight to Mom's was canceled because of the storm. I have a medical conference here. I thought I could get out before the weather hit. I should have sent her away. After everything she'd done, I owed her nothing." But standing there, she looked less like the entitled sister who had erased me from her graduation and more like the little girl I'd once read bedtime stories to. "The restraining order," I reminded her. "I know. I'll go. I didn't have anywhere." She turned to leave, shoulders slumped. "Wait," I heard myself say.
You can stay tonight.
Just tonight. The storm's too dangerous. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. She entered cautiously, as though stepping into foreign territory. In many ways, she was. This home, this life I'd built in Chicago, was entirely separate from our shared history. Here, I wasn't defined by my relationship to her. Here, I was simply Miranda, successful, independent, whole. We moved awkwardly around each other as I provided a towel, showed her the guest room, offered tea. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved pain. Finally, sitting across from each other at my small dining table, the confrontation I'd both dreaded and needed began. I lost everything, Elise said quietly, staring into her mug. The residency, my reputation, the Pierce's support. Even Mom is different now, constantly worried about money since the settlement, blaming me for not fighting harder. I said nothing, waiting. I'm at Riverside Community Hospital now, she continued. General medicine, not the specialized cardiology track I was planning. It's humbling. You're still a doctor, I pointed out. You still achieved your dream. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face. Yes, I did. Thanks in large part to you. She hesitated. Miranda, I don't even know how to begin apologizing. What we did, what I did, was unforgivable. Then why try? The question wasn't cruel, just pragmatic. Because I have to live with myself, she replied. And because the person I thought I was, the person I presented to the world, wouldn't have done those things. I've been trying to understand how I became someone who could treat her own sister that way. And it's not an excuse, but I've been in therapy too. Trying to unravel the family dynamics, the golden child syndrome, the entitlement I was raised with. Mom always made it seem normal that everything revolved around my needs and goals. I never questioned it until I lost everything and had to rebuild from scratch. I recognized the painful self-awareness in her eyes. My own therapy had involved similar revelations, recognizing how family patterns had shaped us both, though in vastly different ways. The identity theft, I said, naming the betrayal that had been hardest to comprehend. How could you do that to me? Shame colored her face. There's no justification. I was desperate, spending beyond my means to keep up with my classmates, to look like I belonged in their world. When I ran out of my own credit, using yours seemed convenient. I told myself I'd pay it all back once I was earning a doctor's salary. The same way I justified taking your graduation seat, keeping the insurance money, I always had a rationalization. Her honesty was unexpected, almost disarming. This wasn't the defensive, entitled sister from the Boston confrontation. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm trying to become someone different. Someone better. We talked through the night, unraveling years of family dysfunction, acknowledging painful truths about our parents' favoritism, my enablement, her exploitation. There were moments of anger, tears, even occasional laughter at the absurdity of certain family myths we'd both believed. By morning, as the snow continued falling outside, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly. The wounds were too deep, the betrayals too significant for that, but perhaps understanding. We had both been shaped by the same dysfunctional family system, cast in roles neither of us had chosen. I should go, Elise said as dawn broke. The restraining order. Yes, I agreed. But maybe when it expires next month, we could talk again. Start with emails or calls. Hope flickered in her eyes. I'd like that. And Miranda?
I'm so sorry.
For everything. As she left, I felt neither the vindication of revenge nor the weakness of capitulation. Instead, there was the quiet strength of having faced my deepest family wounds and emerged intact, capable of setting boundaries while leaving space for potential healing. The reconciliation process with Elise was slow, cautious, and incomplete. Some hurts run too deep for full restoration, but we established a new relationship based on honest communication and respect rather than exploitation and resentment. She remained in her community hospital residency, finding unexpected fulfillment in serving a population with limited access to healthcare. Our mother struggled more with accountability, maintaining that she had only done what any mother would do for her child, though which child she meant remained tellingly ambiguous. 3 months after Elise's unexpected visit, I stood at a podium giving the commencement address at my MBA graduation. Looking out at the audience of fellow students, professors, and families, I spoke about resilience, authenticity, and the courage to reclaim one's path after detours and obstacles. Success isn't measured by titles or achievements, I told them, thinking of how I had once defined my worth through Elise's accomplishments rather than my own. It's found in becoming the person you were meant to be, regardless of others' expectations or limitations. Sometimes the longest journey isn't to the destination, but to the self-knowledge that allows you to value the journey. My father's diary sat in my graduation robe pocket, a tangible reminder of his belief in me and the foundation he provided for this moment. As I accepted my diploma, the credential I'd abandoned years ago to support my family, I felt his presence, his pride, his validation of the path I'd found back to myself. The journey through family betrayal had been devastating, the recovery arduous. But standing there, surrounded by peers who respected me for my own merits, I recognized that I had received a different kind of inheritance from my father. Not just the financial trust that had enabled my education, but the resilience, integrity, and determination that had allowed me to rebuild when everything was taken. Some might view my story as one of revenge, of karma delivering justice to those who had exploited me. But I see it differently. True justice wasn't found in Elise's downfall or my mother's financial consequences. It came in my liberation from unhealthy family dynamics, in reclaiming my right to prioritize my own dreams, and in discovering that I had always been somebody important, even when those closest to me failed to see it. The greatest revenge, if one could call it that, was living well, not to spite those who had hurt me, but because I finally understood that I deserved nothing less. If my journey through family betrayal and redemption has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone you trusted broke your heart? What helped you find your way forward? Family relationships can be so complicated, but understanding our worth outside of them is critical to healing. If this story gave you any insight or comfort, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more authentic family stories. Your support means everything as I continue sharing these difficult but important experiences. Thank you for witnessing my journey from betrayal to rebuilding. Sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the one we're born into. Remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by the strength you find in standing up for yourself.